Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. Today I'm sharing with you an interview I did with Joanne Eason, who is the president of Five Wishes organization. And I think you're going to find this very interesting, especially if you're not familiar with Five Wishes advanced directive forms, or even if you've heard of it, but maybe you have questions about it. We talk all about the form and what it offers, and also the resources that are available on the Five Wishes website. So I hope you get a lot of valuable information from this conversation. And remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel down below. Hit the subscribe button. Also, click on the bell if you'd like to get notifications whenever I post new videos here. And also remember to subscribe and leave a rating and review for the podcast wherever you happen to listen. If you're so inclined, I appreciate any and all financial contributions that might be made to help keep this channel and the podcast on the air. And you can go to eoluniversity.com/support to find out 3 different ways you can make a very small contribution that will make a big difference. So thanks in advance if you choose to do that. And we'll move on now with my interview with Joanne Eason. Today, I'm very excited to welcome my special guest, Joanne Eason. Joanne is the president of Five Wishes organization. She holds a Master's of Arts in Public Relations and has more than 25 years of marketing experience, centered primarily in the health and insurance industries. She has led national crisis communications programs, rebranding programs for several health organizations, and counseled executives on effective communications. Joanne provides strategic counsel on how best to implement the Five Wishes framework. And you can learn more about Five Wishes, which is what we'll be talking all about today, at fivewishes.org. And five is spelled out F-I-V-E. So, Joanne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's our pleasure to be a part of your great podcast.
Well, as I mentioned before, it's been nearly 10 years since I interviewed Paul Malley about Five Wishes. So I realized we need to talk about this again because there are lots of new listeners since then and people who may not be familiar with Five Wishes. So I'm always excited to tell people about it, and I'm glad you're available to help me talk all about Five Wishes. So maybe you could start by just telling us what is Five Wishes and how it got started, because that story is really interesting.
Certainly. So Five Wishes is an advanced directive for, that's a fancy way of saying it's a document that helps individuals document what kind of care that they want and who should have their voice regarding their care if they become seriously ill or in an accident and can't speak for themselves. So Five Wishes was actually started 25 years ago. We're celebrating 25th anniversary as a program under the national nonprofit Aging with Dignity. So our founder and our CEO, Jim Toohey, was the legal counsel for Mother Teresa for 12 years prior to her death. And during that time, he worked as a volunteer in her homes for the dying and was actually sitting next to people in their last moments of life and realized what was most important to them is, yes, the medical treatment that they want and who can speak for them, but more importantly, the existential information of what kind of comfort care, what brings them comfort, how they want to be treated and cared for by the people around them, and what do they want their loved ones to know. So that really actually makes up the whole document of Five Wishes. And so wish number one is your medical power of attorney. So the person you want to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. Wish number two is your medical intentions. What kind of medical treatment do you want if you become seriously ill and you can't speak for yourself? If you're in a coma, do you want to, be intubated? Do you not want those kind of measures, or do you want to leave it up to your family and your doctor and what they believe is best? Wish three is what kind of comfort care and comfort treatment do you want? Four is what kind of, or how do you want others to treat you? And then wish number five is what you want your loved ones to know. So that really gets into the legacy planning. aspect. And then all tidy and wrapping it up is all the legal requirements. So you sign it, you have it witnessed or notarized depending on your state, and it becomes a legally valid document.
So I wanted to ask you, just so listeners know, who is eligible to use Five Wishes? Are there any limitations on who can create this document?
Well, any adult 18 or older should actually have an advance directive. If COVID taught us nothing, it showed that at any moment we can become seriously ill. And so if you're 18, if you're 30, if you're 50, if you're 90, everyone should have an advance directive because it helps you detail what's important to you and make sure that others understand the kind of medical treatment you want. And obviously someone who's 20 is going to have a different view on their medical treatment than someone who's 80 and might have some chronic illnesses. That's why it's important to look at your advance directive after you've completed it. If it's been a few years, look at it again. Maybe your healthcare agent's changed. Maybe you've moved out of state. You need to update the healthcare agent. Maybe you've had a different diagnosis and you're thinking differently about what dignified care means to you. So you might want to update your advance directive at that time as well.
I think that's such a good point. And sometimes I hear people who say, I can't fill this out now. I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen and maybe I'll feel differently later. But that is exactly why you need to fill it out now and then revisit it, because you can always change anything, right? Any response in the document.
Oh, definitely. So like if for wishes 1 and 2, if you make a change in that, you have to complete a completely new document. So if you change your healthcare agent or if you change what kind of medical treatment that you would want, definitely complete a new document because you'd have to have a new valid signature on that. But if you're making changes to information on the kind of comfort care that you want, or if you'd rather be cremated instead of buried, that can just be handled within the document and doesn't need to be rewritten.
And then I wanted to ask you, is the Five Wishes document recognized in all states in our country?
So we do have a solution for every state. Our national document is valid within 46 states, including Washington, D.C. For those states, those 4 states, there's a little extra step based on the state statutes and their requirements. So those states would be Ohio, Kansas, Texas, and New Hampshire. So if your listeners are in any of those states and they're interested in Five Wishes, have them give us a call and we actually have materials to help supplement the national version of Five Wishes.
And what if someone already has completed their state advance directive form, since every state, that is what we're saying, every state has their own form and they have their own requirements. I think they're all a little bit different. But if someone already has a state advance directive form, can they also have a Five Wishes document?
Well, they can, and it gets a little tricky. So if someone has a state document or they've gone to an attorney and made that their advance directive part of their larger estate planning documentation, and they're happy with their decisions on who their medical healthcare proxy is, or and their medical treatment, their living will aspect, that's great. Leave those documents the way they are. But look at Five Wishes and wishes 3 through 5, which really give more of a personal view of what your end of life or what your care would be if you became seriously ill or in an accident means to you. It becomes a legacy document, and it's a great way to actually have people go through that experience, because it helps. What we've heard so many times is that people say, we do this because we want to have a good end of life experience, but what ends up happening is it helps free them, and they look at the document as something that talks more about living than it does about dying. So in that aspect, if you've already got an advance directive and you're happy with what's there, just complete wishes 3 through 5. Leave wishes 1 and 2 empty or blank, or cross a line through them, and you don't have to sign the document then, because wishes 3 through 5 do not they're not considered a legally binding material. This is just directions for your loved ones and your medical providers. So yes, so you can either change what you have if you do want to change from your state document or something creative from an attorney. Make sure that you look at those documents, you put revoked across those documents and complete your new one. So you just don't want to have any confusion over which is the more legal document.
I was just thinking that, and you want to definitely make sure there isn't a contradiction between the two documents, that they say opposite things or something, which would create all sorts of confusion and complications.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Well, I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but one of the reasons I'm personally really fond of Five Wishes is because my own mother completed a Five Wishes document about 5 years before she actually died. And in the process of her working, she worked on it for a long time because it felt really important to her. But during that time, we had many conversations. She called me about each one of the questions, and we talked a great deal. I mean, I'm a doctor, so a lot of times she was asking me medical information about what would it be like if this happened? What if that happened? And so that was so important for us to be able to just sit and have those conversations. The questions in the form really inspired the conversation to take place. And as I said, it took place gradually over a certain period of time, which was really nice. But what I didn't recognize at the time, something I now find so valuable about the Five Wishes form, is because the person completes it in their own handwriting if they actually have the physical form. And after my mom died, and she had left her 5 wishes and a little notebook with all of her funeral plans in it on her kitchen table for us. And after she died, that 5 wishes document became so precious to me because there was her handwriting, and there she was writing about how she wants to be remembered and what was special to her at the end of her life. And I still have it, and it's still so precious to me. So that is something that makes 5 wishes so unique compared to completing a state document, say, where you might just be checking off boxes about what you want. It's those written responses that are so personal and so poignant.
Oh, I completely agree. And it becomes a legacy document, like we had talked about, that it, 5 Wishes is a 12-page, legal document. But when it's completed, or when you're working through it, what ends up happening, it becomes a workbook. And it is great that the way that your mother took her time and really put thoughtful consideration into each one of these questions, and that she had you as a healthcare resource. Not many of us have that. So that was great. But it's also, it makes it so much easier for people to go through something that is in a workbook fashion. It doesn't seem so sterile, and it allows for a lot of more interpersonal conversation and personal reflection that can be documented within the 12-page form.
Well, I know that working in this arena, like, we understand how important it is to have a document like this and to express our wishes. But I'm curious to know if you've heard stories or from people who've used 5 wishes who have reinforced for you just how valuable it is to have done this kind of planning in advance.
Oh, definitely. And one story that comes to mind is the author of the book Driving Miss Norma. It's a wonderful book about this woman, very feisty 93-year-old woman who had a terminal cancer diagnosis at that age, and decided that she wasn't going to go through treatment, but she wanted to go just enjoy the rest of her life with her son and daughter-in-law in their RV, and they traveled the country. And what Tim Bradderschmidt, the author, had written is that, his mother had completed a 5 wishes, and then he went and completed 5 wishes. But what ended up happening to him was that on wish 5, which talks about what I want my loved ones to know, there's a couple of questions in there that say, I want to know my loved ones to know that I forgive them. and I want to be forgiven by my loved ones for anything I may have done. And it made him think, goodness, what kind of grudges, or, who have I not been in contact with? And are there grudges out there? So he reached out to several friends from years ago just to have a conversation and kind of clear the air and figure out, what went wrong during that time, and was able to completely have a legacy conversation with each of these people that there was some misunderstandings and everything got cleared up. So to me, it's not only was Five Wishes useful for his mother and that she, had self-determination and was able to see great things around the country, but it also was a freeing document for him and allowed him to live more comfortably, knowing that he had made a difference in his mother's life as well as all the people that surrounded him.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. And as you said, doing this kind of planning ends up in the end being about how we live while we're alive, because we are alive until the moment of our death. And it ends up focusing so much more on how we live. And it's so important for each of us to come to terms with the fact that one day we will breathe our last breath, and there's no reason to not be prepared for that and to not take some steps now to make sure we're ready.
Right, right. And, I think over the last 7-8 years, there's been a lot more conversation about end of life care and about having these conversations. So I think people are also starting to feel a little bit more empowered to talk about this. It's never an easy conversation, especially when you are faced with a terminal diagnosis, but it's great to start having these conversations now and documenting them. So, perhaps it's a New Year's resolution to look at what's important to you and maybe start thinking, well, who should I have talk for me if I can't speak for myself? So, that's the first step in having an advance directive. Or looking at 5 wishes and kind of figuring out, well, if something happened to me, what kind of comfort care do I want? Do I want to be completely, have my pain managed, and that might make me very groggy and not be able to communicate? Or do I want to back off a little bit on that and be able to communicate with my loved ones still?
Yeah, and it's just so valuable to think about those things. I know for some people think that it's frightening or scary to think ahead, but actually most people that I've talked to get a really peace of mind after they've done these documents and after they've gone through this kind of planning.
Mm-hmm. Great. And you're right. And also it's, people think if, I'm in my 20s, I really don't need to have these conversations. Well, I have twin sons who are 27, and when they got married, they actually had these conversations with their spouses, and they were great ways to also get to know the person a little bit better. And so it doesn't matter what age you are, it's important to start these conversations and continue them throughout a lifetime.
That's so true. And it's never too early as long as you're not under 18. As long as you're 18,
Right.
remember, it's not too early to start talking about it and do the planning. Well,
Definitely.
one thing I like about the document is that there's a section that asks, what does life support mean to you? And I realized how important that is, because actually many people may have in their minds their own definition of what life support is. And it's so good to spell that out so that when we're answering questions about it, we actually know what we're talking about, because people have different perceptions based on television shows they've seen, or, or something they heard about someone else. And so I really valued that section in the form.
Right. And that is a great point. People think that, TV CPR is completely what would happen to them, when it's really a very traumatic experience, and very few people actually come out of that better than when they went into a CPR episode. And then, when people say, well, I don't want any heroic measures, what does heroic mean to you? Heroic is a kind of a loaded word, and it's important to really spell out that, heroic to me might mean something completely different than it does to you, Karen.
Yeah, that's so true. And
Mhm,
as a doctor, I appreciate the fact that it reminds me when I look at that section of the form to talk to the person who's filling it out about exactly that, what their own perceptions are, so that maybe I could clarify some misinformation that they have or help them understand what CPR really is and the real outcome from CPR if they have some sort of misperception about it. So,
mhm,
I think it's really valuable to bring that up, and
mhm.
all the more I keep remembering when my husband and I filled out our own will, and our estate attorney, as you were just alluding to, brought out this form and said, "Here, check off on this living will whether you want life support or not." With, of course, our attorney didn't know anything. He didn't know how to answer any questions about it or how to inform us of anything. We're just checking a box on this legal form, and
Mhm.
it kind of it's very concerning to think of how many people that is the legal document they have
Mhm.
for their end of life wishes. And there could be a lot of misunderstandings involved in that.
There could be, and if your listeners have questions about that kind of material, we're always able to answer. They can call our 888 5 wishes number, or find us on the website and just send us a note via our website, and we'll be happy to help answer any questions that they may have on that.
That's really helpful. And I know, is it possible to complete the 5 directives online? Is there like a digital version people can complete?
There sure is. So we have a 5 wishes digital, and that actually, we consider that like our 5 wishes for life. So if you complete it, it stays in your dashboard, and you can keep going back and changing it as you need to. And then you can print it out as a PDF and share it with your medical providers and your loved ones and your healthcare surrogate. And so what we like to do is make sure that it becomes something that you share. So the one thing about an advance directive, you don't want to keep it in your safe deposit box with all of your other estate planning documentation. You want to spread this thing as far wide as possible, because if something happens to you, it doesn't do you any good to have all of your wishes just kept under lock and key. So make sure that the people that need to know it have it, and that it's in your medical record within your healthcare provider's system.
Exactly. And so take it to your healthcare provider, have a conversation with them, but also
Mhm.
make sure you're talking to your loved ones. For sure, the healthcare proxy, whoever it is that you choose, and make sure they know you've chosen them as a
Right.
proxy. I've seen that happen before. People find out
Mhm.
they're someone's proxy and they didn't even know that they'd
Right.
been chosen for that.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so, but always it seems to me it's really good to have a discussion with the whole family about the wishes and what's been written in this document so that everyone's on the same page.
Right. And it's so funny that you say that, because so many people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about this amongst my family. Well, it can't be any worse than talking politics. So it's actually a great way to start a conversation. And on our website, if you go to 5wishes.org/resources, we have a slew of different resources to start the conversation. So it could be, I read a book. So we have a list of a ton of different books that talk about end of life, or um, other areas within serious illness. There's movies out there that we recommend. It's a great way to start a conversation by watching a movie together. And then that kind of takes the onus away from the people that you want to have the conversation with, and you kind of focus on a character. And then there's obviously podcasts, and you're on that resource as well. So it's just a great way to start that conversation without pinpointing it to certain individuals.
Yeah, that's excellent. And the reason being that it's best if all your family members hear the same conversation at the same time, so
Mhm.
that, because one thing I've seen happen over and over again is one person will say, "Mom told me this," and another one say,
Mhm.
"No, she told me the opposite." And when those conflicts arrives, it's very hard to resolve them because it's
Right.
one person's word against another. But if everyone saw the document and heard mom talk about it and explained why she wanted things, it's so much easier to find common ground.
Right, right. And that's what is most important when you get into those health crises. And decisions need to be made. Healthcare providers need to know decisions immediately. It's best to make sure that there's a united front around this, and having those conversations and documenting those really makes a difference, to make sure that you're fulfilling the wishes of your loved one.
Exactly. And back to my story of my mom, it
Mhm.
ended up in our conversations as she was filling out her 5 wishes that one of the questions I just asked her to think about is, how do you want it to be during your last days of life? Like where do you want to be? Who do you want to be with? And she said, I want to be in my own home and I want you to be taking care of me. And
Mhm.
so that was simple, very simple, but so, so clear. And
Mhm.
because she had written that down, because she had talked about it, when the time came, my older brother, who in his own heart, he really wished my mom would stay in the hospital. He didn't really feel comfortable about having her come home, but because he he read it and he heard her say it, he knew that's what she wanted. So he was
Mhm.
able to overcome all of his own reservations about it and go along with that because he wanted to honor her and what she wanted. So I got to live that firsthand, that it literally does save families from conflict and division that can happen at this very
Mhm.
tender and challenging time when everyone's struggling with their emotions and their grief.
Right. Yeah. So we've seen or heard stories from people who have gone through this process that, they've heard what their loved ones want and they follow their wishes as well as they can. And then there's other ones, like you said, that there's division within the family, regardless if they know what the wishes are, that they kind of inject what their wishes are on the person. So it's really important to make sure that when you become a healthcare agent for somebody, that you're following their wishes. They might contradict what you would want, but it's really important that this becomes something that is important to your loved one.
Yeah, and I know someone I heard said that doing this kind of planning is actually a gift of love that you can give to your own family members because
Mhm.
you're unburdening them really from the weight of some of the decisions that have to be
Yes.
made at the end of life by letting them know what you want, so it's not on all on their shoulders to figure that out and to make choices.
Definitely. One of our taglines is that this is a gift of peace of mind. It's a peace of mind for your loved one, and it's a peace of mind for you because you know that you're following the roadmap that was laid out for you.
Exactly, exactly, and again, with my mom, it was true because she was in the hospital when she was diagnosed with a terminal condition, and there was one option to possibly do surgery on her, but she was 89 and already in frail health, and we knew the chances that she would have a complication from surgery and never be able to go home were extremely high. So in talking that out, we decided the surgery isn't worth it. What she wants is to be at home. And if we say yes to this surgery that's not likely to actually help her, but could interfere with her wishes, and that was a tough decision to make. But again, I had it in writing and I knew what she wanted. And that changed everything in terms of being able to make that decision and do what she wanted. And uh, I never looked back. I never had a single regret about that decision.
Right. I had the same experience with my mother, and that she had a terminal diagnosis with cancer that had metastasized. And she said, I'm done, and I just want to die at home. And though they lived 3 hours away from us, they moved into our home, and we actually got to spend the last 3 weeks of her life in our home with my parents. And it was a lovely. It was difficult. I won't, sugarcoat it, but it was some of the most fondest memories that I have with my mom, and the great conversations that we were able to have. So yeah, we were able to follow her wishes as well, and it really, um, it was wonderful. And unfortunately, she died before Five Wishes was even a thing. So, but we were able to have those conversations that really kind of detailed exactly what was already in this document. So it kind of is fortuitous that we were doing that back then, and I'm here now with this organization.
Yeah, that's so interesting, kind of coming full circle in a way, and now being able to help other families have
Mhm.
this experience that you had. And I think as we're talking about this, it's such a good point that you made earlier that our wishes most likely will change as we go through life because my mom was able to say I don't want any kind of treatment,
Mhm.
but had she been 30 years younger, that would have been a different answer and we would have made different choices. So it is important to remember that choose what's right for you right now, knowing that you have no idea what will happen in the future, but keep changing it as you grow and change. And you mentioned the reasons you might change it, getting a new diagnosis or moving to a different
Mhm.
state.
Mhm. Right. And it's important too to make sure that you speak with your healthcare provider. They're the experts on your health, and they can help you understand what the diagnosis means and what your trajectory on that diagnosis is going to look like. And so your advanced directive might change several times throughout that disease course. And it's important to have continual conversations to figure out that, all right, this is what I know about what's going to happen. Is this still the kind of medical treatment that I want?
Yeah. And I think another thing, I should have brought this up earlier, but that you were mentioning, the very first step is choosing the healthcare proxy. That
Mhm.
person ends up being a pretty crucial person in all of this as well. So
Yes.
that's also a very important decision that needs to be made and shouldn't be done too hastily or without thinking it through.
Right, and within the construct of Five Wishes, we actually detail all of the roles that the healthcare agent has. And there's significant ones that they can move you out of state. They can determine the type of medical care that you get. They can apply for Medicare and Medicaid on your behalf. So there's several different things within here that if you do not want your healthcare agent to have that responsibility, you can mark that out within there. So if you don't want to move out of state, make sure that's known, and put it in writing within your document. But it's an eye-opening experience for those who haven't been a healthcare agent about how much can go into this. So it's really, like you had mentioned, Karen, important to have that conversation with your healthcare agent that this is an important role that I'm asking you to do, and this is what is important to me.
Yeah, and I think some people just assume, oh well, I'll just choose my oldest child. I'll be my,
Mhm.
my healthcare proxy, whatever, without really thinking, is that really the best person that I know to be in the position of making these decisions, especially because
Mhm.
they're hard and sometimes they carry with them a
Mhm.
burden or, concern, like, did I do the right thing? And is is your oldest child the right person to be carrying that responsibility?
Exactly. And my spouse and I have had that same conversation. And I told him that, if I'm seriously ill, I want you by my bedside. I want you to be near me and not having to deal with some of these other issues. And that's why it might be important to have somebody else be that healthcare agent. I have a sister-in-law who's a nurse and a bulldog. And I, would really think that she would probably be an excellent healthcare agent on this. So, and then the other thing that we've noticed as well is, like, if someone has 3 children, they don't want to pick one because they don't want to, make the others feel bad. So they appoint all 3 and they have to come to consensus. And in a time of, crisis, it's really difficult sometimes for healthcare providers to get consensus within a group. So though within Five Wishes, we say, here's, the first person, then your second choice and third choice, some people go and put, we want all 3 to be the same. That really becomes like a roadblock if a crisis happens. So it's important just to appoint one. Yes, they can talk to each other and kind of have these conversations, but one person's the voice.
Yeah, and just think about how hard it can be just to figure out to get everybody to agree on what to have for dinner at night. Imagine trying to get all three of your children to agree on
Mhm.
what kind of treatment you'll have at the end of life.
Right, right. So you're right, Karen. Picking that healthcare agent's probably one of the most important things that you'll do when you think about your end of life care, and don't make the decision lightly.
And so, and you mentioned too, picking two alternates who could fill
Mhm.
in because, it is possible that the proxy you've chosen won't be in a situation where they can actually fulfill that role when it's at the time it's needed.
Right, right. So, I'm looking at mine, and my sister-in-law lives 1,000 miles away. So she's not my first choice because I need someone who's going to be closer to me and be able to be accessible. Will she be able to be of counsel to my current healthcare agent? Definitely. But it really, you need to have someone who's going to be there available in case something happens.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. And then someone, I mean, if you have two alternates, all three people need to be filled in on the same information again at the same time. Because in
Mhm.
case, say, your first choice is traveling out of the country, or maybe they're
Mhm.
ill at the time and can't fulfill the obligation, you want to make sure the
Mhm.
alternates know
Mhm.
just as much as that person would about your wishes.
Right, and it's also, if it's a spouse and you're driving together in a car and you get in an accident, you need to be able to have those alternates be able to step up.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I wanted to mention is why someone might choose five wishes over just filling out the documents for their state or add five wishes on. But because it seems like the limitations of state documents is that they are only valid for the state in which you live. Is that the case?
Most states have reciprocity. So if you complete an advance directive in your state and you're a snowbird and you travel to another state, they should be accepted. It obviously might cause some confusion with healthcare providers, and then there might be some question as to the legality of the advance directive. Five Wishes has been around for so many years, and there's 41 million of these in distribution. So most healthcare providers are aware of Five Wishes, so there never seems to be a question about it when it's called into being used. So for the most part, state documents can be used across state lines, but Five Wishes, we know that it is recognized across all the states and has a good recognition. So it becomes a little easier if it's called into question.
So it's portable and it's easy. And actually, do you recommend if people travel a lot? And I'm in a situation now where I live half time in one state and half time in another.
Mhm.
It just occurred to me like, oh my, I should be bringing my documents with me when I
Mhm.
go back and forth because, you know, you never know. So do you recommend people keep it with them when they travel or?
Oh, sure, definitely keep it with you. Or if it's easier, we have some people put it on a Google Doc with, a URL code that they can go and access it that way, or they have a PDF of it and they carry it on their phone. So, it's easy just to make it an electronic document after it's signed and witnessed, and then it becomes portable.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. Just knowing that it can go with you wherever you go, and there won't be a controversy about it. In most other states, maybe those four states that have extra rules,
Mhm.
I suppose there could be a problem there. But it's nice to know when you're traveling that you have a legal document that is valid wherever you go.
Right. In those other four states, as long as it's been signed in your state where it's legally valid, there should be reciprocity there.
And so we should talk about that again, about what is necessary to make it a legal document, the signatures, witnesses, whatever, what's required for that.
Certainly. So on page 10, and I'll just bring this up a little bit so readers can see. I don't know if you can see it there, but page 10, that's where you sign it. So you put your signature on it and your date and your address. And then it should be signed with 2 witnesses in the majority of states. And that's someone who's not your healthcare agent and someone who's not related to you. So it could be a neighbor, it could be, anybody else. In 4 states, it requires notarization, and that's both the Carolinas, Missouri, and West Virginia. So those have to be notarized. And some of those states require that it be witnessed and notarized all at the same time. So there's several hurdles to kind of jump over in a couple of the states. But for the most part, it's really easy to just sign it and have it witnessed. Or if you don't want to find witnesses, go to the bank and have a notary just watch you sign it there.
And your healthcare provider be a witness, or is that recommended against?
It depends on the state. Each state is different. What we tried to do within 5 Wishes is take the most extreme caution. And so we put on here that it shouldn't be your medical provider. Some states allow it, some don't.
Yeah, I understand that, because there might be a fear that there's some kind of coercion. Somehow the medical provider is trying to get patients to make certain choices in their documents. And so I understand wanting to make sure that it's all free and clear and that these really are the patient's wishes and they're not being directed by anyone else.
Right. That's right. And then also there's some states that require that it not be anyone who has any financial holdings with you, because again, the same reason, the coercion aspect.
Mm. Yeah, so that's very interesting. When always when I begin this conversation about planning for the end of life, it starts out seeming simple because it's just a simple form that you fill out, but it's so much more complicated. All the decisions that you make and the reasons why you make them and making them legal, it ends up being more complicated. But all the more reason to have a form like 5 Wishes really guides people through each one of these decisions and gives, at least in my opinion, it gives everyone the information they need as they're completing it to make sure they do everything properly.
Right. And it's really a document that you don't need any additional training on. It kind of walks you through each step of the way. We do have other resources like videos and a conversation guide. So if you want to have a deeper conversation with your family, we kind of go through prompts on how to start it with your family. Some of the frequently asked questions we get about advanced care planning. And you can also find those questions and answers on our webpage.
And one thing I wanted to ask is, do you ever have people say, educators who like create a workshop around 5 Wishes and get forms for everyone attending and help all of them fill out the wishes at the same time? Do you see that happening?
Oh, it happens so often. And throughout our 25-year history, we've worked with over 50,000 organizations and distributing 5 Wishes. So, we're a small nonprofit, but we have a large grassroots reach through organizations that assist us in ensuring that people can complete these documents. So a great place to look could be your library, it could be your faith community, it could be a local hospice. Several of them have community events, and you can pick up a document for free from them most of the time, and they'll help walk you through it and complete it. And then they have people there to witness it for you. So by the time you're done, you have a completed document. During those presentations, and those are awesome to have completed documents, but we also then recommend that you go back and have a conversation with your family about, hey, I did this, and I think it's important that you know that these are my wishes, and this is why I feel this way, and make sure that you make copies and that they have it.
And even though these are really personal decisions, it does seem like this kind of planning and thinking about it might be easier for some people in a group, because you recognize, first of all, everyone needs to do this. Everyone is struggling with the same issues, and maybe conversations come up that remind you of something or make you think of something you hadn't thought of. yourself that someone else mentioned. So it seems like that could really help soften it a little bit to be doing it with other people, and maybe even make it a little bit feel a little bit more lighthearted instead of so weighty and serious and
Mhm.
heavy.
Right. And there's several different ways people do this too. There's like death over dinner conversations that people have. They go to a restaurant and they'll just have a dinner and talk about death, like their experience that they've had with loved ones or what their fears are. And that's a great way to start these conversations. There's also games that people play. There's one called Hello by Common Practice, I believe, that kind of goes through very similar questions that are in Five Wishes, but makes it more of a game on, how to complete or how to have these conversations with your loved ones. So there's many different ways that people can become more comfortable with these conversations. I know some people prefer to be in large groups. Some would rather just stay at home and do it themselves. So there's many different ways to make sure that these conversations are had and people have a good understanding of what it means to them to have a life well lived that would culminate in a death that it has meaning for them.
Well, and I know back so many years ago when I was working in hospice at the time, so we had stacks of Five Wishes documents, and I got one thinking my mom really needs to fill this out, and I knew I was giving it to her, and then I decided, wait, I also need to fill it out, and I decided to do it first before I gave it to her, because it gave it more credibility in a way that I was asking her to do it, but also let me see the challenges of some of the questions and thinking it through, so I'd be prepared to know how to advise her, or even how to talk it through with her. And I also was able to go through and say, I filled it out myself, and this is what I decided for me. This is what I think would be right for me. And so
Mhm.
I recommend that to any family member. If you're thinking, I have an older loved one and I really want them to fill this out, is do your own document first, and so that you really know what it entails, and use that as a conversation starter too.
Right. It's the seal of approval. I've done this and found it useful. I think you would too.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that, yeah, that's a really great way to introduce it. So,
Mhm.
tell us, does it cost anything to use Five Wishes, and what are the options available to people?
Certainly. So the document itself is $5 if you purchase them individually. And many people purchase them that way. And we ship them out to you via the postal service. The digital document is $15. Again, I had mentioned that it's for life, so you can keep going in and changing it, so you don't need to purchase another paper document. If you're in a congregation or have like a book club and want to do this with groups of more than just your family, we have better pricing, group pricing, I guess you'd say, that if you purchase 25 or more, they're $1 a piece. So it's a very affordable product. Like I had mentioned, we're a national nonprofit. So our mission really is to safeguard human dignity. And how we do that is to ensure that your wishes are allowed to be fulfilled, so you can have the dignified life and end of life that you want.
I love that idea for a book club, maybe to get
Mhm.
together and read the book Being Mortal, or some other book
Right.
like that, where you're learning a lot about
Mhm.
end of life choices and
Mhm.
possibilities and options and what happens at the end of life. And then as a group, hand out the documents and work on those, maybe work
Right.
on them over time too. Because again, with my mom, that seemed to be the most effective thing, is to really take our time and do it gradually. And I guess that's because we started at a time when it wasn't urgent. We didn't need the document like tomorrow. We had
Right.
time to talk it
Right.
through.
And that's the important part of it, is that if you do it when you're not in crisis, it becomes something that is actually a better understanding of what you want, because it's not rushed. And then speaking of books, one of my favorite is When Breath Becomes Air. I don't know
Yes.
if you've read that, but I find that to be something that's really compelling. It's about a physician who has terminal cancer and is working through his own mortality.
Oh, that's absolutely a beautiful book. Just so touching. Another book I thought of mentioning is Jessica Zitter's book, Extreme Measures,
Mhm.
where it's a bit harrowing because she's an ICU physician and she talks about what happens when people don't have advanced directives
Mhm.
and how people end up getting kind of the default medical care in our healthcare system because there's no one who knows any better, no one who knows differently to ask for something different or to advocate for the patient. And it really brings home the message that this kind of planning, it's so important for each one of us to just take the time to start thinking about it and talking about it right now.
Right. And Karen, that's a great point, that if you don't have an advance directive, the hospital will go to, do every measure to keep you alive because that is the default. So unless they have direction otherwise, then you will get everything that medicine can throw at you.
And it will be costly, financially costly, but also just in terms of human suffering. And as you said, almost lack of dignity at the end of life to have every aggressive intervention done instead of really honoring you as a person and an individual with your own wishes and your own vision of how you might like your last days to be.
Mhm. Right. And some people's wish might be to have everything, and that is completely fine. And it should be honored as well.
That's such a good point because five wishes also allows you to state
Mhm.
that is what you want everything to be done. And I think that's really important that we honor. It's there are no right or wrong choices. It's simply what would you prefer and what do you want for yourself.
Right. Right. And that's, I think that's the beauty of it, is that, it's this, from a national perspective, we were talking about state statutes, but from the national perspective, the umbrella legislation was the Patient Self-Determination Act of 1990. And that outlined that, people have a right to choose what kind of medical treatment they want if they can't speak for themselves. And so it really gets down to that self-determination, and you determine what kind of treatment you want.
And I do know there is a third answer to those questions
Mhm.
about healthcare that is um, that you want the doctor to help make the decision if giving you life support or invasive treatments could benefit you, you would honor that choice if the doctor
Right.
recommends it under those terms. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but maybe you could describe
Yes.
that better.
Yeah, so the third option is if and let me get it so I can speak correctly here. I want to have life support treatment if my doctor believes it could help, but if my doctor believes that to stop giving me life support treatment is not helping, please stop. So, and I think that really comes into play if you're in an accident and something wasn't expected. What do you want to happen?
Exactly. And I appreciate that because it recognizes that there are many different situations in which life support might be offered or be given to a person. And we have to be able to be flexible for the nature of those situations too.
Right.
And we may need different decisions at different times depending on the circumstances.
Definitely. And it also speaks to the condition that that advance directives aren't black and white. It's not like I'm doing one checkbox, that the whole spectrum of scenarios there are infinite scenarios of what could happen. So we list 3 within 5 wishes, but it kind of is to give a framework of something, if you're brain dead, what kind of treatment do you want? But everything is gray. There's no real right or wrong decision at any one time. This is just a framework to help your loved ones understand what kind of medical treatment you want in certain situations.
Yes. And I know I like that you address the grayness of these decisions when again the most of the forms push us into a black and white situation. Well, do you want CPR or not? And
Mhm.
that's challenging. And I like that there's this option because that's exactly what I've talked to my family about. Of course, I don't want to be kept alive on a ventilator if my body's done and my brain isn't functioning. I don't want that. But on the other
Mhm.
hand, if there's a reason for it, say someone's out of the country and they need time, they need to keep me alive so someone has time to travel to be with me, or
Mhm.
the family needs time just to adjust to whatever has happened and a little time to get through it and to get through the shock of it and to be okay with it. Well, that's fine with me. I want whatever's best for everyone to happen at that time. And it's nice to be able to express those gray areas and allow for that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, though I know some people have said that it makes them feel uncomfortable because they don't want doctors to have too much power over these decisions. And I understand that. But if you have a doctor that you feel you trust or a system that you feel you trust, that's I think that could be a good alternative.
Right. And doctors, by their nature and their training, want to do what is right for the patient. And so they're going to provide direction or counsel to the family members on this is what likely would happen. But it's important to have that discussion of what your goals are and what you hope to have. So if you have a terminal illness and there's a grandbaby due in the family, that's something that that's what you hope for. That's your goal, is to be there to welcome that newborn into the family. That's important to share with your loved ones in your family. So that way treatment measures could be followed and developed along those lines. So like I said, it's gray, and everyone's situation is different. So it's really getting in touch with what becomes important to you at the moment.
Exactly. And why again we keep revisiting all of these
Yeah.
choices and over and over again throughout the course of our lifetime.
Exactly. Exactly.
So should where can listeners access the five wishes? Do they just go to the website?
Certainly, they can go to fivewishes.org, and that is five spelled out. And there's a whole bunch of information on the page for individuals. And then if you're in an employer, and this is something that you think might be important to offer as a benefit to your employees, we have employer packages. We have a whole program for healthcare providers. Like we've been talking about, it's really important for healthcare providers to have these conversations. Well, we provide training and other resources for them to make sure that they're having meaningful conversations with their patients. And then people can also call us at 888-5, the number 5, and then wishes. And we can take an order over the phone or answer any questions that they might have about advanced care planning, be it the 5 wishes document or completing a state form or just having a conversation with their loved one.
That's really wonderful. It's so nice that all these resources are made available for people. And I just wanted to put a plug in that when I ordered forms, I got the deal, the 25 forms at $1 each, because one form is not enough. I mean, I wanted to fill one out. I wanted to have some extras because what if I made a mistake or I wanted to change things, and I also handed them out to other family members. So chances are it's way better to just order a packet because that will inspire you to give them to other people rather than if you go back and just order one at a time. So get the
Right. And we
packet.
also have other packages. We have what's called our starter pack that provides you with five wishes and a conversation guide. Or for the holiday season, we have one that's called the gathering pack that comes with 15 5 wishes, a couple of conversation guides, some pens to help you document it, and access to an online streaming video. So you guys can actually have one of our teammates walk you through how to complete 5 wishes, wish by wish.
Wow. Oh, that's wonderful. I love that idea for a holiday gathering. That's so super meaningful and really powerful.
Right. And
That-
it could be a gathering event past the holidays if no one could get together then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Joanne, this has been wonderful. It's been so informative, and I love having a chance to talk all about Five Wishes and let listeners out there know about this wonderful resource they should take advantage of. So thank you so much for joining me.
Karen, thank you so much for having us, and thank you for bringing Five Wishes to light to your audience. We appreciate it and hope that it's been helpful.
Thank you, and it's been my pleasure. So best wishes with Five Wishes.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Joanne Eason, and that if it's of interest to you, you'll go to the fivewishes.org website and check out the Five Wishes document and see if it's something you would like to complete for yourself or with and for your loved ones. So we'll see you the next time we get together for the next video. Bye-bye.